Do you want to know a story that should be considered pagan heresy, that is within the Bible, that many Christians believe is a true story of something that happened, but it's virtually impossible that it happened? And not virtually impossible because of science, just virtually impossible because of history. Because when you research the history of the Pool of Bethesda, what you will realize is that it is unlikely that if Jesus was walking around, that he would have committed this act, and that the Jewish people would even have been present at the Pool of Bethesda. For all you Christians who are already offended, just take a moment and listen. So, most people who grew up Christian, raised Christian, you've heard of the Pool of Bethesda, and the main thing that you know about it is the fact that the Jewish people used to hang around this pool who were infirm. For the most part, they were paralyzed. And when an angel would come down and trouble the waters, then whoever was the first person to jump in would then be healed. Which I've always found interesting, because even when I was a Christian, I always said, why does God only have the power to allow this angel to heal one person at a time? And it's whoever gets there first, not who's the most infirmed, not let's just heal all the people who are present there, and so that they can see the miracle and power of God and have even greater, it wouldn't even be belief. You'd have facts about your God. You definitely would be able to say, God is real because I got into the Pool of Bethesda and I was healed. And if you go there and when the water's trouble, Yahweh's angel is going to move that water and then you will be healed too. But no, it's whoever gets there first, whoever has family members to get them there first, because you know, when you read the story, there was a man who had been sitting there for 30 years, 30 plus years. And he had no one to get him into the waters. So every time he made his way down there, boom, somebody jumped in before him. So he'd been waiting. You know, he become a fixture. He's probably like that guy that you always see at that same spot, and he just loves to sit there and people come by and he talk to them. They probably, know each other well. I know your family, your kids. How are the kids doing this year? Did your harvest come in? I heard that your sheep had some really good little babies, and you increased your herd. Probably was a fixture that many people conversated with. Well known, accustomed to the misery to which he was in, knowing that he was never going to make it into the water, because this God only has the power to heal the first person who jumps in. So here's Jesus after a feast. He comes to the Pool of Bethesda. And it's interesting because before that, he was doing the Samaritan woman thing and then dealing with the official and healing the official's son. And then it just jumps over into the Pool of Bethesda. And then after that, it just jumps over into him doing a sermon and feeding 5,000 people. It's almost like John was trying to outdo the other biblical narratives that were written decades prior to it to show more and more miracles. And we're just listing miracles, no continuity, just listing miracles and giving these stories just coming out of nowhere. So you know the story. Jesus then tells the man, take up your bed and walk. The man complains, but then Jesus tells him again, he gets up and he walks, and then Jesus is accosted by the Pharisees, Sadducees, and say, you did work on the Sabbath, and so on and so forth. And it goes into showing Jesus's authority. Well, here's the problem with the Pool of Bethesda. And the problem with the Pool of Bethesda is that no Jewish people would have been at the Pool of Bethesda once you realize the history of these so-called pools. So it is believed that these pools were created centuries prior to the Jesus story ever happening. But Jewish scholars argue over whether or not the pools were created to wash sheep. Some say the pools were too deep to do so. But even still, the biggest argument that Jewish people had back in those days and still today is that those pools were originally created and dedicated to either the goddess Fortuna, the Greek goddess Fortuna, or the Greek man healing power Asclepius. So Asclepius was known in the Greeks for having this power of healing. So scholars battle over, was it for Fortuna or was it for Asclepius? Goddess Fortuna, hear my cry. There's a whole little thing that you had to say a prayer for Fortuna in order to bring good fortune to you. But anyway, so the Jewish people would not have been participating, and even so, the Jewish people were happy that the original placement of these pools were outside of the walls of Jerusalem prior to the 1st century CE. So they didn't mind those pools being out there. They didn't mind those pools being dedicated to Greek gods and Greek Messiah types, because they would not have wanted those pools to be inside the city, where then non-Jewish religious people would have access and be practicing their religion inside of the walls of Jerusalem. So the Jews would not have been there. Now, in 1 AD, Hadrian extended the walls of Jerusalem to bring the pools inside the city. But even bringing the pools inside the city in 1 AD, remember, Jesus is supposed to have been born at this time. We got 30 years before Jesus is supposed to start preaching. Those pools would have still been known to be the pool of Fortuna or Asclepius, either or. So the Jewish people still would not have been going to this pool, because it would be them worshiping a different god, another god. And that is idol worship to them. So the idea of that happening would not be. Now, why is it in the Christian Bible? I am not a scholar to the point where I can say that this portion of John was added to the story in 100 CE, because the story, John was written somewhere between 60 and 100, and most scholars believe that it was written closer to the 100 CE time frame, and was not written by the actual person who might be a disciple of this Jesus named John, because it was anonymous, and the book didn't get his name of being called John until 180 with Irenaeus. So it was just something that was written. Whether or not it is part of the manuscripts that they had in 180, I'm not sure of. Couldn't find that information concerning this particular story. But it is very well known that it wasn't until the 5th century that Roman Christians came and renamed and built the church on this space and named it after Mary, Jesus' so-called mother. So for at least 300-400 years, this pool was known to be a pool of Fortuna or Asclepius. And even when it was inside of the city walls, still being known as a pool for Fortuna or Asclepius, not until the 5th century, which is the 400s CE, was it then named for Mary. And then I believe about 200 years later, it was renamed for Mary's mother and called, and the church was built over, called St. Anne's. So it's named after Mary's mother, it's called St. Anne's. And then then during the Crusades, it was turned over to the Muslims. And then it came back to the Christians. And then in the 1800s, it was offered to Queen Victoria as a sacred place based on Queen Victoria. So we know that this pool has changed names based on who was in control of it. But at no point in time has this pool been under Jewish control to where it was named or it was identified as a place where an angel came and stirred the waters. I believe this story is most likely, and maybe there's some scholar out there who can give more information on it, that this pool was something that the Roman Christians changed the narrative concerning it and created this story about Jesus healing a man there, because the Jewish people were still holding on to the ancient traditions of the angel stirring the water, and realize how idiotic it is that only the first person who jumps in is the only person who gets healed. If this guy truly wanted to prove himself, and so that people would then definitely worship him and follow his rules and commandments and all those sorts of things, which is what this guy supposedly desires, then that pool would just be healing people left and right, every time the water moved, heal people. That's how you prove yourself to somebody. Like, I can't come to you and say, hey, I'm going to feed you once a year, and because I feed you once a year, everybody should believe that I love you. No, but if I'm feeding you every day, then people will say, damn, maybe he loves them. Maybe he even like them. You see what I'm saying? So what do you guys think?